Hey, how's it going? You're listening to PPG Radio Episode 6, Physical Preparedness Group Radio, KXYZ, The Buzz. Today we're going to be talking about why treadmills are for the weak and the importance of the underhand pitch. I've recently been doing a lot of running inside. If you've been listening to this show for any amount of time, you will have picked up that cardio is my weakness. Particularly long distance cardio with no rest periods. I've always been a big sprinting guy and kind of more explosive guy, but with lots of rest periods. And so one of the biggest weaknesses that I have that I've been shoring up last year and into this year has been more volume with my running, more long distance running, and trying to cure that ill. But as many of you know, it is really, really cold outside, and it's really, really not fun to run outside. And for the past 2 weeks, I have not been able to bring myself to go outside. Traditionally, I run 2 different workouts outside, where I will run a mile time workout, and then I'll do like a bunch of laps where I'll do anywhere from 2 to 3 miles. And then I will have a separate workout where I do 400-meter sprints with 3-minute rest time, and I'm trying to essentially shorten the rest times while maintaining my speed on those 400-meter runs. But it's really cold. When I wake up at about 6 in the morning to get those runs in, it's, in the high 20s, and it's just not fun. And for whatever reason, my motivation has been feeling pretty low. And so instead of just not running altogether, which is something that a lot of people commonly do when something is too hard, I threw myself the underhand pitch. I went with the easy option that still allowed me to get a lot of good work in. So I've been going into the gym and running on the treadmill. Now, I don't love the treadmill in the sense that I do think that running on a track or on regular ground is a lot harder, and it's a lot more productive, especially for us preparedness-minded athletes, because we want to be out in the elements. We want to be out in the cold and the heat where it's uncomfortable. And in addition to that, there's lots of people who might disagree, but in my opinion, the amount of force you have to produce to drive yourself off the ground on the track or wherever else is a lot more than as opposed to on a treadmill, where the ground is moving for you and you're essentially having to just pick your feet up off the ground. And so the amount of overall energy, the amount of overall difficulty of the run itself is not nearly as high on the treadmill, in my opinion. Having said that, I approach the treadmill run like a variation exercise, an assistance exercise, if you will, to the actual running on regular ground. Just like how we would think of the front squat as an assistance movement to help build our back squat, or how we might think of the barbell row as something that will help increase our potential to lift more on the deadlift, I look at the treadmill the same way. I'm not necessarily doing the best thing that I could be doing, but it's absolutely 1,000 times better than not doing any running at all, which is kind of the alternative right now, just because it's really cold all day. So even though I'm not getting that exact same stimulus that I would be getting if I was running on the track, I'm still really blowing my lungs out and challenging myself and building my cardiovascular endurance. Even the way I run on the treadmill, I make it easier and more entertaining for myself. I put it on a somewhat steep incline, and I do 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. But for me specifically, that's very challenging, because traditionally I'll do a relatively short sprint, but I'll go as fast and as powerfully as I can, and then I'll walk back the distance I just sprinted very slowly. So my work to rest ratio is a lot higher, meaning that if I was sprinting on the track or on stairs or whatever, if my sprinting is like a 1, then my rest period would be like a 2, if that makes sense. But on the treadmill, it's a 1-to-1 running and resting ratio. So for me personally, it's a lot harder in that way. Even though my legs aren't getting as tired, my quads aren't as fatigued at the end of the workout because I'm not having to drive off of the pavement as hard, my lungs are still getting really burnt out. And I have other workouts during the week where I'm still kind of producing that explosive force with something like a sled push or a box jump, something like that. So overall, the stimulus that I want to get out of my workouts, I'm still getting, even though I'm not being as specific as I could be, and I'm not being as optimal as I could be, because the best way to get better at something is to do that thing that you want to get better at. And I want to get better at long distance running, specifically the mile time. So this is a good example of the underhanded pitch. I quoted Mark Bell in an earlier video, and I'll quote him again. He said something to the effect of, working on your weaknesses is really hard. And that's what I'm doing now, working on a weakness with my running and my long-term conditioning, especially with no break. And it sucks, and it's not fun to work on your weaknesses. And it's good to throw yourself that underhand pitch so you can knock it out of the park. And with this, going to these treadmill runs as opposed to not running at all because it's so cold out and it's so miserable and I just haven't worked up the courage to do it for the past couple of weeks, I'm still getting better. And I'm still going in the right direction, even though I'm not doing exactly what I planned. And so I want you guys to try and think of how you can take this into your own training. Specifically, those of you who are more beginners and still trying to work out the kinks of how you're training, when you're training, how much you're going to be doing of it. Sometimes scheduling issues come up and you got to work out at home instead of the gym, and sometimes this and that comes up. And sometimes it's just good to do the thing that allows you to get in a lot of work that you don't hate so much. And what you'll discover is that there's lots of different ways to get better. Specifically, if you're really bad at something. I am really bad at long distance running. It's, like I said, a big weakness. And so I don't have to be hyper specific in my training in order to get a good training benefit that's going to help me be better at it. Just because my body is so new to the adaptation relative to something like strength training, which I've been doing for many, many years. And motivation-wise, obviously I'm not in the cold, so it's a lot easier to bring myself to do these type of sprinting run workouts 2 or 3 times a week. But it's also fun. It's fun to do something a little bit different. Running those 400-meter sprints, they really suck because they're like somewhere between a sprint and a long-distance run, so you kind of end up just sprinting for a very long distance. And at the end of each one, I'm just gasping for air, and it's really painful, especially when it's cold. And I get that same effect with these, to where I'm pushing myself really hard, but in a different way. And the big driver of progress for me, where I'm really pushing into that discomfort zone, is the short rest periods. 30 seconds, bam, I'm back on the treadmill. And so it's been fun to kind of discover a new conditioning tool, even though obviously I've known about the treadmill. I've trained people on the treadmill before. I've run on the treadmill before. I've never tried this work to rest ratio. I've never tried it at this incline. And I haven't done the treadmill consistently in years, simply because I'm such a big advocate of getting outside and doing your runs there. So this episode might sound a little bit more rambly, but I hope you guys are able to take away something from this, specifically the idea of the underhanded pitch. You don't always have to ram your head against the wall in training doing the hardest thing possible, although I do recommend doing that as often as you can bring yourself to do so. Sometimes it's good to say, hey, I like doing this thing. It's fun, it's different, and it allows me to get in a lot of good training volume that's going to set me up for success when I go back to that really hard type of training that I'm maybe not feeling motivated to do right now. Especially for those of you who are working jobs where you're doing a 10, 12-hour shift, you got to come home, you're hungry, you're tired, the whole 9 yards. It can be hard to bring yourself to ram your head into that wall doing the hardest workout possible. So throw yourself that underhand pitch and knock it out of the park. Get that good training volume in. Get the work in, even if it's something that's not as hard as you could be doing. I hope that's helpful to you guys. If you liked the video, like, subscribe, follow me on Instagram, all that good stuff, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for listening.